So India is often known as the pharmacy to the world, right? So almost 50% of the medicines that are consumed in the US, the generic ones are manufactured in India. Similarly, India is the second largest agrochemical manufacturer in the world. Right. So, I mean, a little bit about my background. I've spent the last 10 years in across B2B manufacturing in India. So, been with startups which have been at the forefront of doing everything from raw material sourcing to manufacturing across industries. I think one thing that stood out when we started dealing with chemicals, even in previous setups, we saw that this was a very high value, high margin segment. So we were initially just following the profit pools or just following the money, and we saw that the kind of companies that were emerging, there were small factories in India which were doing significant amount of margins and value add in the whole process. At the same time, there were also a lot of factories that were underutilized, that were struggling to even get that demand. So I think that insight was built over a period of maybe the last decade, and that's what sort of culminated in identifying how do we get these factories up and running and bring them to a global scale. At the same time, we also, my time in the US a couple of years ago made it very, very obvious was that the demand that is coming into India was very overwhelming and very, a no-brainer, that people were looking at India as an alternative to China about how manufacturing could happen. Again, the challenge was that perception about whether India has the capabilities, how deep is the market, how deep is the manufacturing ecosystem, and that's where we actually decided to tackle that problem. Yeah. So, I mean, essentially, if you look at a global innovator today, so specialty chemicals value chain, typically there are these innovators which are creating new technologies, new chemistries that we use in our everyday lives, right? So things like pharmaceuticals, agrochemicals, even cosmetics and industrial chemicals. These are things that are constantly seeing new technologies coming in terms of new products, as well as more efficient ways of making the same product as well. When a typical global buyer is looking at an Indian manufacturer, there is this lack of flexibility or a question in terms of what the capability is and how much they will be able to deliver, and how transparent the whole process will be. I think that's where the system we felt could use a full rejig or could use a more streamlined approach in terms of getting that product out. So this was on the demand side, but I think the larger insight was always on the supply side or the product for us. So it's about fundamentally the supply chain is about how well you are able to deliver a particular product or a technology to the market, right? So there is a lot of depth that you have to go into the product, into the manufacturing, into the R&D, and that's what you can deliver as value. So that's the main area that we wanted to tackle. Yeah, I think we had a lot of experience with the whole distribution and trading platforms, or even bringing the product across borders geographically to sort of bring solve for access, or discovery was something that we've always done before. Fundamentally, where when we took that same approach with chemicals, and when we sat across the table with a potential buyer and said that, hey, we can get whatever you want, and we can make sure that it is manufactured and delivered to you. Fundamentally, there was a question about how are you going to do this without your own plant? Where is your scientific team? So I remember there were a couple of large buyers that I had met in the US at that time. I mean, it was as simple as no manufacturing plant, no conversation. So I think that asset light approach was a little hard to digest. So in fact, we then went back to say that we had to go again first principles in terms of why asset light is a problem, or why somebody would want a plant. So that actually revealed an answer about business continuity as a problem, or the reliability of supply as a problem, because this is not a market in which you can just buy and sell something. Customers are looking, they are making mission critical products, and they are looking for something that is very, very stable and reliable in the supply chain. So we actually doubled down a lot more to say that if that's the part that needs attention, then let's put a lot more muscle, which a small factory will never be able to do, to put that enterprise grade R&D team, enterprise grade manufacturing team down to each small factory and create still be asset light while we are delivering that finished product at a world class quality. Firstly, Scimplify is a R&D-first asset-light manufacturer of specialty chemicals. Essentially what that means is that for customers who are looking to manufacture a particular specialty chemical, typically it was actually done across a lot of smaller factories or maybe larger factories in China, where they are looking at getting these particular technologies manufactured and month on month, quarter over quarter, get it delivered to them. We are building the technology to be able to develop that product in a more efficient manner, in a better cost structure as well as value structure, to be able to serve the same purpose. And we operate as a full stack solution that does everything from R&D to scaling up to commercial manufacturing of that product across today 4 industries that we operate in. So the 4 industries that we work with are pharmaceuticals, agrochemicals, there's flavors and fragrances, and industrial chemicals. Yeah, so I think this is a big tailwind that we have latched on to. It's not something, it's been definitely in the works for the last 10 years at least, I would say. So the whole China Plus One shift has brought a lot of manufacturing to India. But if you see more specifically within these industries I'm talking about, so India is often known as the pharmacy to the world, right? So almost 50% of the medicines that are consumed in the US, the generic ones, are manufactured in India. Similarly, India is the second largest agrochemical manufacturer in the world. So the structural infra has always been in place to be able to build that outcome. I think the utilization or the efficiency of that whole platform and connecting those dots which are currently operating in silos is essentially what we feel is broken. And one more thing I'd like to add about the advantage of India in these specific industries versus more traditional manufacturing approach is that, see, it's very hard to compete with China on things like cost of labor or cost of real estate or cost of capital and things like that, wherever there's economies of scale involved. What India is very good at is taking a lot of information or IP and packing it into a small product like a pill, and that's what we deliver to the world. So wherever there is that R&D or technology element involved, today you'll see that development happening in semiconductors in a big way also, for example. So chemicals has always been a strong point of India because that R&D and technology investment, high quality, cost effective scientists also that are available in the country is what will create India's advantage. Yeah, I think for a buyer, they are essentially looking for. So I'll actually give you an anecdote on how we actually saw this story evolve. So a lot of the B2B in previous avatars in terms of sales and the customer facing conversations that we've seen usually started with something like, hey, what is it that you are looking for, and we have this great manufacturing system on the back end, and we can deliver that to you. When we tried that with chemicals, the customer was like, okay, what do you have? And then there is this friction, or there is this awkward silence in terms of how do we position this. So then we went back to our manufacturers to say that this is what the customer probably wants. What do you have, and how can we sort of deliver that? And then again we take this portfolio of products that the manufacturer has, but the customer still is super technical. So I think the key insight here was that the customer is not looking for somebody who can just provide that product, but has like deep technical expertise to be able to say that tomorrow if there is some variation or change in technology or something like that, they are able to sort of get into the weeds of that and understand how R&D can solve for that problem or manufacturing can actually solve for that problem. So that insight on the customer side made me realize that everything, the buyer here is very, very technical. So usually you're talking to a scientist. A lot of these promoters of large companies are also scientists or chemical engineers. So to have that level of depth is very, very important. If you don't have that, then that skepticism is very natural. Yeah, of course. I mean, there's a long way to go. I think fundamentally, if you look at how China has evolved in the last 20-25 years, there has been a lot of focus in terms of technology development at an individual level and technology development combined with manufacturing at scale. I think India has done maybe these two parts very well, albeit in like silos or in disjointed parts. So I think when you talk to a customer globally, they would work with a separate scientific team to develop a technology, and they would probably work with a separate manufacturer to commercially manufacture that as well. So there is that disconnect of having a separate knowledge center and a separate cost or manufacturing center. So I think if we have to bring that whole story together, then we need to create a full stack approach that says that we own the whole value chain end to end. There has to be a very clear engine for matchmaking as well. So today, another thing that is interesting about India is that India probably has thousands of these factories. I'm talking about like advanced chemical reaction factories, and these factories today operate like completely independent of each other. So everybody is pitching for a part of the business with a global buyer, and this is something that is very unique to India. And in that sense, we are actually what Scimplify is trying to do is to create that layer which will be able to identify the right factory or the right resource for each of these, whether it is scientific talent or whether it is manufacturing prowess, to fit that into a single coherent solution for the buyer. Like I said, the essence of the chemical supply chain actually begins with the product. So it's about so I'll tell you a little bit about the journey about how we operate also. Our journey actually begins with developing those sort of technologies at a lab scale first. So we do this in our in-house labs where technology is developed, and then from this lab it has to transfer to a manufacturing plant which can do this in, you go from a few grams to several metric tons in terms of scale. That's where I think a lot of the failure points or a lot of the scale up challenges actually come through. And how we see the complexity is that today there are maybe thousands, if not tens of thousands of such value chains that exist, and you have to be very, very picky and selective about which ones that you can go deep and build expertise in. So today we have about 30 odd chemistries where we have that capability to create those molecules at a lab level and then scale it up as well. So I think fundamentally on the product side there is huge complexities that customers also understand and value, and which is why you'll see that the segment also operates at like a different margin structure compared to traditional manufacturing, and that's where I think we are really trying to go deep and say that, hey, how can we make that whole process a lot smoother to go from lab to plant and then scale it up and be fungible across multiple plants as well. Tech primarily does 2 to 3 things, I would say. One is that the whole discovery and matchmaking part is really, really complex. So, today if it's not a one size fits all sort of manufacturing approach. It's not like you can take one product and make it in any factory. So there is a lot of complexity to that. So today we have 500 factories where we have mapped out hundreds of data points across each of these factories, and it is an extremely complex and iterative process to say which factory will get to make which product, and how well they will do it, what compliance standards they will meet, etc. So that tech actually helps in fast tracking that whole plugging in the right factory, plugging in the right technology in a big way. And second thing I think is the transparency in the whole value chain. So today if you see maybe the larger factories or the bigger companies have still incorporated a lot of transparency into the value chain, but that's probably still about 30% of the market. The majority of the market still operates in a very fragmented offline manner, and that's where tech can play a big role in terms of giving that trust and transparency. So this is not only about hey, where's my order, it's also about this is the kind of technology that we are using, this is the kind of yield that we are getting in every batch of manufacturing. So our technology actually plugs into every factory to say that how's the chemical output coming, how's the yield coming, and you trace that all the way back to what you made in the lab and see if that is consistent across. So I think these are the two primary areas where we will be targeting that. And of course, a lot of future applications in terms of how tech can actually build value in terms of predicting the kind of opportunities that we see and the synergies that we see across our value chains. Yeah, I mean, 2005, I think I would have spent the first 2 years just setting up the lab. So we've been very fortunate to have a lot of government infrastructure also set up, which today if you see our labs which are based in Hyderabad, there is, it's almost like a co-working space that a scientist can walk into and start doing work in. So I think a lot of that infra has actually come up in the last 20 years. A lot of manufacturing has also been set up in the last 20 years. The world has realized that there is a lot of dependence on one country, which would be hard. Another thing is that if I were to start this in 2005, China would definitely be eating my lunch because it was too raw then. A lot of the manufacturing was also happening in very, very centralized, so the opposite of globalized, and you would have the US manufacturers serving the US consumers and so on. So you would be directly competing with China, and the value chains were maybe not as mature. So definitely the timing in terms of what we are doing now, the last 2 years and maybe even the next 5 years were very, very crucial for us to get into this industry. We saw that the demand was also very, very obvious. There is no question about an average buyer looking at India as a great opportunity. And B, I think the supply side was also ready. There's these groups of scientific teams, there's groups of manufacturing plants which are super cost effective, world leaders in some products that are already being manufactured. How can we expand that portfolio to add a lot more technologies? Yeah, I mean, see, asset is absolutely crucial because everything is manufactured in a factory, right? So there is no manufacturing without the factory. So what we believe is that the foundational layer, and if you'll see how the industry has evolved, is that first about 100 years ago, maybe all the BASFs of the world and all the big giants today have actually started by building basic commodity chemicals, which are now commodity. At that time maybe they were a little more specialized. And then the next layer which we are going through today is to say that we move from the commodities to more specialty chemicals. So this actually involves that layer of R&D, it involves that layer of investing upfront in technology to say that how do we create IP, how do we create more efficient technologies, more sustainable technologies. So that's the current wave. I believe the future will have these assets or these factories, and then there will be the layer on top of it which actually designs the correct technology for each of these assets. So I think it is going to be in close collaboration and close working with these assets that we will be able to take this the India manufacturing from, let's say, a 50 billion specialty chemicals to a 200 billion specialty chemicals outcome. So that outcome has to have multiple asset light approaches to be able to develop technologies and provide that full stack solution. At the same time, it should also have more asset creations and more efficient utilization of those assets. The good thing is we are seeing both of those playing out as we speak, and I think the next 5 years will be absolutely transformational in setting those for the next decade after that. Yeah. So if I'll work this on both the sides. So today if you see there is a customer let's say this customer is sitting in Japan and they are looking for developing a technology and scaling it up. So they would first go to a research center which would, or a group of scientists which would develop the technology. Then they would separately or parallelly also try to find a plant which can manufacture it at scale, and then deliver that consistently to the customer. I think if I were to look at a very utopian view about how the smart supply chain would look like, it would be a single layer which has all of these qualifications in terms of cost, sustainability, and compliance that actually are already pre-qualified, both from an R&D perspective or technology perspective and from a manufacturing perspective. And the customer can actually go through this layer and pick and choose using the tech layer that we have to pick and choose which is the right a facility for them or the right capability for them to manufacture what they need. And they should be able to move across, like that fungibility of technology and of manufacturing facility should be there on the platform. And all of this is obviously while maintaining, they should have the optionality in terms of a cheaper or more expensive, so the usual pricing. And then there is going to be a quality parameter which is not just tested at the factory, but there'll be a third party testing layer. So that entire ecosystem basically sits in one place. Yeah. So just going back to the earlier example, I think in general B2B commerce also there is this you can actually go to a customer and say that we can get anything custom manufactured for you, and definitely in the chemical space also custom manufacturing and custom development is a big industry. What we saw as the gap in the market is that, and this is when we started the company as well, we saw that there were a lot of these smaller molecules which both the customer as well as the manufacturer was like, hey, I need this and I am willing to make this. The supplier was saying I was willing to make this, but how do we develop the technology to make this, or in simple words, the recipe to make this? So that's where we realized that the whole crux of the problem lies in the R&D about how to make that molecule or the technology to make that molecule. So we started working with some scientists externally at that time, and today also we see that the entire engine actually starts from what is the technology that you use. So every customer conversation actually starts with, you can't just be like, hey, this is the product. They will actually press you in terms of what's the technology behind this, what route of synthesis or what's the recipe that you're using for that, and what's the how are you able to manage the process, how are you able to manage maybe certain specific parameters on the final outcome that come out on the product. So all of these parameters are actually controlled and defined at an R&D level, and that's where you can actually create a tectonic shift in terms of how the manufacturing process happens or how the product is made. So I think R&D was and will continue to be, I think, the main starting point for all of the products that we are bringing to the market. Yeah, sure. So essentially today our R&D teams, we operate across 2 labs where we have dedicated teams for each of the chemistries or end applications that we are basically working with. I think the next phase for us would be to go into relatively more complex chemistries to add more application areas as well. There are some new age industries that we are super excited about building in. So there's electronics and semiconductors as a category. There is certain food and nutraceuticals as a category that is also seeing a lot of innovation. So we are also looking to bring in the best talent in these respective fields. We are also looking at building dedicated capabilities, not just in one product, but to go backward in the value chain and have India as the forefront innovator in that technology for this product. So I think that's the next phase of growth for us. We obviously will expand in terms of the current R&D capabilities. One major unlock I think we are working on now is a platform that we very recently launched, is called IONS. It's basically a platform for very similar to the manufacturer network, also to connect the entire R&D network that exists in India and globally for that matter, to map out individual chemistry capabilities for each of these scientific groups or scientists, and be able to allocate the right project to the right scientist across the board. So that's something that is going to be out in the next few months. We were already doing pilots for that, and we want to basically be able to provide this to a global audience, both from a scientific community perspective as well as a customer perspective. Yeah, I think the scientific team hiring was the toughest part when we started. So both me and my co-founder, we actually come from B2B, manufacturing and enterprise setup sort of background. The scientific part was something that was outside of our core capabilities at that time. So we actually were very lucky that a few scientists actually came and joined us at that time, and they've stuck with us and they've grown with us in the last 2 years as well. I think fundamentally what I've realized now is that scientists, if you see, to give you a very vague analogy, is where the software developers were there about 15 years ago, right? When tech startups were hardly heard of in India. They were these geeks who were coding it out in their respective companies. I think in the chemical space we are seeing a very similar wave right now, where there is this massive talent pool that sits across all of these larger companies. There are hundreds of thousands of scientists that are there across the country. A lot of them are PhD scientists that work in India. A lot of them are working in foreign countries now, wanting to move back to India as well. So I think that freedom to operate and build what you love is something that really gets people to stick and stay with us, and that's something as a culture that we are also driving. And scientists have brought in their colleagues, friends from previous companies also, and that's how the team has largely grown since day one. Another thing is that I think when you are in a larger company, whether it's a MNC or one of the larger ones in India, there is like a very strict mandate about what you are doing. It's basically a particular product that you develop, or a project that you deliver, and then you're done. I think we celebrate and encourage this in our scientific teams to say that you took this from a lab to let's say $1 million in terms of delivered product. So that journey is something that creates a lot of ownership, creates a lot of belongingness to scientists, and I think that's something that we want to continue to provide to the ecosystem. So it's a mix of all of these things. Right now, if you see, there are, at the end of the day, you have to deliver the product to the customer. So in some sense, that is true. But I think the larger vision in terms of what we are building is, again, a very, not maybe the most direct relevant example, but the closest parallel would be like a fabless company, right? So in the semiconductor space, you will see something like Intel Inside. So what would make us successful at one point to say that you're using some product which has Scimplify inside on it, right? So basically, it's almost like you are developing the technology, you are developing the infrastructure and the entire technology roadmap to take it from concept to actual physical product, and you are doing that in an asset light manner to be able to constantly be innovating and bringing new technologies. So I think I don't know if there is an exact parallel word for that in the chemical space, but that's essentially what we are looking to build. Yeah, I mean, we've also interacted with a lot of these giants right now. We are actively engaging with them on several projects. So the way the industry has worked is that whether it is the very large, so these are tens of billions of dollars of companies that we are talking about, probably hundreds of billions in market capitalization. All of them have developed expertise in a certain set of chemistries, and there is enough and more juice for them to sort of keep going deeper in that. What Scimplify is doing is taking a more horizontal, I would say there is, you go half a mile deep and pretty wide, like several miles wide in terms of individual chemistries that we are accessing. So I think that's the focus of why customers would work with us. There is expertise in different chemistries, and there is excellence in terms of service delivery and end-to-end ownership of the whole product, right from R&D to commercial manufacturing to quality, and then getting the final product to your doorstep. So I think that value add for a BASF to be able to find it with one large factory is definitely a big plus. But they would, there are still several chemistries, maybe tens of chemistries, where they are not able to find something that is a full stack solution for a particular chemistry. So that's where we start with, and of course we are adding more and more capabilities. We've been working with some of the largest enterprise customers in India in these spaces, and now expanding a lot in the international segment in the similar bucket as well. So in the next 5 years, of course, in terms of financial metrics, we are looking, to have delivered $1 billion in terms of the output that we are getting to. We are looking at, there are several profitability metrics. Profitability is very close to us right now, but like in terms of overall the scale of profits also is something that we have a very close eye on. I think strategically what we would like to be in the next 5 years is to have very deep chemistry expertise on at least 50 chemistries. We have buyers that are globally present, hopefully about 500 customers that are driving the bulk of this business, and we have products that we are that we've built expertise in. So in the next 5 years, if we have a few hundred products that we are known as the experts in, and that market sentiment or the customers are able to talk to each other that this particular product is where you should go to Scimplify for, I think that's the strategic objective that we would have made it. If we can create that base in the next 5 years to create a name for ourselves in particular products, chemistries, I think we can accelerate that a lot more post that. So in the next 2 decades, see, largely for the last 20 years, I would say, India, and for that matter even China, has worked as manufacturers of generic products, right? So in that sense, there is innovation in terms of process, but the innovation in terms of product is probably limited. And you will see that in China, that has shifted a little away in the last 5 years or so, where there is innovation on the product as well. There are new drugs, new biologics also that are being created across different categories. I think India is on the path. Maybe some green shoots are very early right now, but definitely in the next 20 years, we have to get to that space where we are not doing only generics, or we are followers of technology, or playing catch up in terms of maybe cost efficiency, etc. We should also be innovating products in terms of the new molecules, or maybe new cures for different types of diseases, or new industrial chemicals that we are bringing to the market. I think that's where we want to be, that's where Scimplify would want to be. And I think India definitely is seeing very early signs of that. There are some amazing inventions that have come out in terms of new technologies, new patents that have been done on the product side. And if we can create that ecosystem to enable this whole, again, going back to that earlier example, that a customer sitting in Japan is looking to develop a product or source a product. There is a scientist sitting in Hyderabad or Bangalore which is developing that, and then there is a factory in, let's say, Gujarat or Vizag which is manufacturing that. That entire ecosystem can actually plug and talk to each other to deliver output at speed, at scale, and with like full transparency. That platform is, I think, what is the need in the next 20 years.